Hello and welcome back to Baby Elias's Stories. We now return to Blade Runner 3, Replicant Night by K.W. Jeter. The final chapter, Chapter 18. The first time Deckard had been in this building in its original form back in L.A., he'd had to climb laboriously to its roof, his scrabbling progress through the crumbling, waterlogged plaster and sagging beams impeded by a hastily bandaged hand. The fingers that the batty replicant had broken, aching and useless. Fear had driven him then. He'd been trying to escape death. This time, he was walking toward it. "I'll take the stairs," he thought wryly. The shaft of utility stairs at the back of the building. It was undoubtedly the same route that Sarah had already taken. In the damp air, as Deckard craned his neck to look upward, he caught a trace of perfume, one of the opiated floral scents that his mind and senses had learned to associate first with Rachel, then with Sarah. The invisible molecules were tinged with something more acrid, but just as distinctive and evocative. Cigarette smoke, something dark and expensive, suited to the taste of a Tyrell air. He looked down and spotted on the landing's rough concrete silken white paper and brown shreds of tobacco ground out cold by her shoe. The metal steps echoed in the narrow space, loud enough to evoke a shiver in the video camera lenses that peeked out at him from their clefts in the unfinished walls. Up ahead, above him, Deckard saw a rust-mottled door left open, creaking on its hinges as the fan-driven storm winds swung it back and forth. He stopped, rain spattering in his face as he tried to catch sight of anyone waiting in the darkness. Nothing. He grasped the cold pipe rail and continued climbing. "Sarah!" He pushed the door all the way back. The metal clanged against the side of the hatchway structure and stepped out onto the roof. Warm rivulets trickled down his throat as he called out again. "Where are you?" No answer came. Deckard walked farther from the door, leaving the stairs and his escape behind him. Looking up, he saw no stars, but the broader points of the lights in the studio's trusswork rigging, only a few meters away, as though, in a child's notion of the world, he had climbed all the way to the dark heavens, the universe's weld-stitched limit. The lights' spectra had been shifted down to an icy blue, colder than the streets' veins of neon. Shadows fluttered across him like the wings of unseen, untouched birds as staggered ranks of archaic wind turbines, blades long and scimitar curved, rotated in the damp breeze coming from the edges of the set. He worked his way through the windmills, avoiding the scything arms, coming at last to the roof's raised parapet. His hands grasping the crumbled brick and thick tatters of asphalt sheeting, looked as bloodless as a corpse's flesh. They hardly seemed to belong to him at all. The uncanny sensation passed through him as though he were looking at someone else, someone who had slid inside his body and face. The hands and the body that leaned its insubstantial weight into them might have been those of the actor who had played him in the video he had seen. The disoriented feeling increased, setting him even farther away. For a dizzying moment, Deckard wondered if he were still watching the video, the artificial world into which his own life had been transformed. Squeezing his eyes shut, his hands gripped even tighter on the fragile stone. He tried to make himself feel real again, or as real as possible. "I've become my own ghost," thought Deckard, "a dead thing that watches and mourns the past." He'd felt that way before, when he'd sat beside a glass-lidded coffin, leaning forward with his chin on his doubled fists, looking at the sleeping, dying woman he'd loved, keeping his vigil through one sleepless night after another, time seeping away beneath the real stars, the rain swallowed by earth, and the dead leaves beneath the trees. It might as well have been his own face he'd seen beneath the glass, in a video monitor rather than a coffin. He had died, or as good as, even before Rachel had. He just had the privilege of witnessing his own death, over and over, in one cold world after another. The bleak meditation didn't end, but became familiar enough, an old wound, that he could function once more. Deckard opened his eyes and looked over his shoulder at the elaborate rooftop set. They did a good job, he had to admit. Benton and his crew of technicians, the people who had constructed the set. In the thin, fragmented light, he could see how close they had come to the original. How much the fake was indistinguishable from the genuine. The turbine spun in place, like idiot dervishes on edge, over a buckling field speckled with pigeon shit. Had they scraped up the droppings from an actual LA building roof and shipped them here? Or was there a flock of birds kept on hand in some remote aviary zone of the station? It all smelled real enough. A blending of monsoon steam and guanoid archaeology, that at least some of Deckard's senses were fooled. He looked back over the parapet at the imitation city that surrounded the building. All the little tricks of the video trade had been used, from foreshortened perspectives to banks of fiber optics for a vista of pinpoint lights stretching to an imaginary horizon. Other whole sections were blank or covered with chroma key backdrops for digitized mattes to be CG'd in during post-production. The miniature city seemed caught between different levels of reality, at some muddled point halfway on the line from dream to something that could be touched, in some way that made the dark, nocturnal city he saw now as real as the LA he remembered on Earth. Realer than real, thought Deckard. A night made of the same stuff as the replicants, dreams and fears, and a desperate longing to exist. He had lived in that inchoate city, had been part of it, but, he knew now, hadn't belonged in it. It's their world. He nodded slowly, rain trickling across the backs of his hands. Their night as well, in which he was just a shadow, a thing that wouldn't even be remembered when the sun came up. "Hello, Deckard," the voice, the one that he'd known he would hear, came from behind him. "I was waiting for you." From over his shoulder, he looked and saw Sarah standing a few yards from him. In the center of the roof's area, the wind turbine spinning and stretching away into darkness, he turned and leaned back against the parapet, hands gripping its edge on either side. "I had some business to take care of first, with the little girl. I had a talk with her. How sweet. Sarah stepped forward into the partial light, filtering down from above. The skin of her face and throat looked cold, bloodless. I suppose that was a good thing for you to do, whether she's real or not. Actually, I don't care anymore. The gun in her hand glinted, as though a piece of the dark had frozen. It's not important, is it? Maybe not. His heart had ticked faster for a moment at seeing a weapon in someone else's hand, knowing that he didn't have one. It all depends on what you want. Ah, she nodded and smiled. That's true. I used to want things, different things. With cruel playfulness, Sarah raised the gun to eye level, arms straight, and looked down the barrel at him. And now, just one thing. Guess what it is? I've got a pretty good idea. Inside him, his pulse had slowed back down as a resigned calm moved through his blood. Whatever was going to happen, he had prepared himself for it. I wouldn't have come here if I didn't know. The face of the woman he loved studied him over the gun's black metal. You're not really human, are you, Deckard? Rachel's face, Sarah wearing it like a mask, though it had been hers to begin with. If you ever were, you've managed to get over it, like I have. So it's not just a cop thing, having ice water going in and out of your heart. It's just something that happens to people like us. He nodded in agreement. The eye of compassion. What was that? Nothing, answered Deckard. Something somebody told me about. We're not the ones who decide who's human and who's not. He looked over to the faked skyline surrounding the building, then back to her. There's nothing we can do about it. Yes, there is. There always is. No trace of irony or sarcasm sounded in the woman's voice. You shouldn't give up hope like that. Her hand squeezed the gun, tight and trembling. You can always kill. That works, especially if you do it to the things you love. Then you have a chance. A chance of what? Of being human? No, Sarah gave a shake of her head. Of not caring anymore. So when you die, when you take care of yourself finally, it's not so hard. The voice of madness, speaking the same words inside his head. Deckard listened to her and knew that it would be easy to agree, or to go even further, deeper into one's own madness. The temptation always existed in him to accept only what he saw, what part of him wanted to see and believe. That it really was Rachel standing in front of him, alive again, unchanged. That the other woman with the same face, the one named Sarah, was as irreal as she had thought the child waiting downstairs inside the building was. A memory, a bad dream, a hallucination. If that were the case, he wouldn't have any problem with her pointing a gun at him and pulling the trigger. That was a small price to pay for seeing Rachel again, if only for the moment between the firing of the bullet and its entry into his deluded heart. He had closed his eyes, though he could still see her. Remembering was enough for that. Easier as well to mentally edit out the infinitesimal differences, the coldness at the dark centers of her eyes, a hard curl at one corner of her mouth that made her Sarah instead of Rachel. It didn't help much when Deckard opened his eyes again. The sight of the woman sent a sharp, pointed blow through him, more painful than if she had actually squeezed the trigger of the gun. Is that what you're going to do? He watched as the momentary tremor left her upraised hand. Kill yourself too? Why not? Sarah's eyes almost seemed to be looking for sympathy from him. Why should you be the only one to get lucky? Deckard continued to watch as she strode forward all the way to the building's edge. She turned and leaned back against the parapet, a carefully judged distance away from him, just far enough that there was no chance of his being able to grab the gun before she fired. You know, Sarah mused aloud, the illusion kind of breaks down here. She glanced over her shoulder, toward the street below. It's not really very high up at all, is it? Her gaze turned to him. Not like the real one, back in Los Angeles. I've seen that one. I've been there. Head cocked to one side, she smiled coyly at him. When I was first finding out all about you, Deckard, I went and looked at the places you'd been, where things happened to you. She nodded toward the drop on the parapet's other side. You must have been pretty scared back then. If you'd fallen from the real one, they would have had to have picked you up from the pavement with a sponge. Whereas here, Sarah gave an unimpressed shrug. Hardly enough to kill someone. You might actually even survive. Maybe. Deckard looked over the edge behind him. She was right. The illusion of the city's reality was dispelled from this angle. The machinery and interlaced cables of the set were detectable, like the secret workings of the world revealed by a paranoid vision come true. Is this the deal you made with Urbenton? He always wants the best footage he can get, so a shot of me falling, I imagine that would be just about perfect. He could re-edit the video he did about me, put in a new ending, one where I die. Maybe that would suit both him and the people he's working for. Oh, it would. You're exactly right on that one. Sarah nodded, as though admiring his take on the situation. That's pretty much the UN's little agenda. The first version of the video, the one you saw, that was only shown in the Martian emigrant colony. She pointed toward him with the gun. They'd love to do another version for broadcast on Earth that would really prove just how dangerous escaped replicants are, in case there might be anyone starting to feel sorry for them. Urbenton could always fake your getting killed, do it with special effects, all the different tricks they have for that sort of thing. But there's nothing quite as convincing as reality, is there? No matter how much you have to fake it. Plus, this way, there's no living Blade Runner named Rick Deckard turning up later to embarrass anyone. The little details, like you're not being killed by the fall, but from a bullet. Sarah gave another shrug. Urbenton can fix that up in post-production. Or not, that's his business, not mine. She studied the gun in her own hand for a moment, then looked at Deckard again. I'll have kept my part of the bargain. You're a person of your word, in your own way. I try to be. Sarah spoke with no more irony than before. I've only lied when I had to, when there was something I had to have. And what did it get me? She shook her head. Nothing. I learned my lesson. Her voice turned bitter. I should have just stayed what I was, not tried to be something else like your precious Rachel. It's just no good. The dead get all the breaks in this world. The artificial rain had lessened a bit. Deckard looked up to where the clouds and stars should have been, letting the drops wash down his face and throat. But do you know? The words were soft, almost a whisper. Do you know who you are? Come on! Her response was sour, irritated. I'm not in the mood for the usual mind games, Deckard. I'm tired of playing even my own, so it's not likely I'm going to fall for yours. If that's what you're going to try, then I'll just stop wasting time and kill you now. There's a limit to how sentimental I get. He said nothing. Instead, he reached inside his jacket and took out the thin, flat rectangle of the photograph. The one that had been given to him by the dead man back on Mars. Deckard held it by one corner and gazed at the long past scene it revealed. Then he held the photo out to Sarah. "What's that supposed to be?" She leaned back, regarding the object with suspicion. "Something you and your rep simp friends faked up?" "No," he shook his head. "This is the real thing. Go on, take it." Keeping the gun leveled at him, Sarah reached out and grasped the photograph between her own thumb and forefinger. She turned it around and studied it. "I don't get it," she announced after a few seconds. Her brow creased. "Who is it?" "Come on, Sarah. You know." He tried to make his words as gentle as possible. "You've seen them before. You've seen other pictures. They're your parents." She said nothing. Deckard watched her staring at the photo. The image it contained was in his head as well, engraved there from the moment he had first seen it, and Marley's voice telling him what it meant. Those were fused together, insoluble. He knew what Sarah was looking at. A photo of a bed, the sheets and covers all white, a woman sitting up with the pillows mounted behind her. The woman was smiling, as was the man standing beside the bed, leaning down to get his face close to hers. The two of them looking into the lens of the camera. It must have been mounted on a tripod or a high shelf. The remote control was just visible in the man's grasp, his thumb pressing down the button that had flicked the camera's shutter. The two people were Ruth and Anson Tyrell, the same two people, the couple that Deckard had seen in another old photograph, a newspaper clipping on the wall of a cramped, cluttered office at the Van Nuys Pet Hospital, back in the real LA on Earth. A moment of the past, a frozen section of time, caught and preserved. Those people had been alive once, and then they had become memories. When? The expression on Sarah's face grew more troubled. When was this taken? "You can figure it out," said Deckard. He made no move from the parapet he leaned against, but pointed to the photo in the woman's hand. "Look at what he's wearing." That was also the same as it had been in the clipping on Isidore's office wall. Look at the emblem on the breast pocket. That's the jumpsuit from the expedition. The picture was taken on board the Salander 3. He could tell just from watching that the meaning of the photograph was becoming clear for her, bit by bit, as though the image was gradually moving into focus, the past it held becoming real once again. This wasn't on Earth. Sarah raised the photograph higher, a few drops of rain spattering against its empty white backing. This must have been when they were still on their way to the Proxima system. "That's right," Deckard nodded. "Before those other things happened." In the artificial night, the glow from the light suspended above was enough for her to make out the details of the old photograph. There were more than just the two people, the adults, Ruth and Anson Tyrell, held in the image. "If that's my parents," Sarah spoke slowly, wondering, "then that must be me." Sarah used the tip of the gun's muzzle to point. "One of those." That was what he wanted her to see, what she needed to see. The photo's image was just as clear in Deckard's thoughts, as clear as it had been when Marley had taken it from the hiding place in the Salander 3's first aid kit and had shown it to him. There were 2 infants cradled against the new mother's breast, one nestled in the crook of each arm. "Your mother had twins," said Deckard simply. In that faraway time, on board the galleon, somewhere between Earth and the stars, Ruth Tyrell had looked exhausted but happy, smiling at the camera. In the photograph, Anson Tyrell had the traditional dazed grin. "Your father delivered them with the help of the Salander 3's built-in medical circuits." "Twins," Sarah's voice was a murmur. "There were 2 of us." Deckard didn't stir from his position at the building's edge. "Twin female infants." He repeated verbatim what Marley had told him. 2 healthy baby girls. You and your sister, Sarah and Rachel. She looked up at Deckard when he spoke the second name. "My sister?" Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "That's impossible." "It's true," said Deckard, "and there's proof. The little girl downstairs inside this building. Her name really is Rachel. She's not a hallucination. She's your twin sister." "Oh, of course." She gave a quick, sharp laugh. "Even though she's, 10 years old? There's a problem with that, Deckard. I'm sure you can see it." "There's no problem. You and the little girl were born at the same time, or a few minutes apart. You're twins. But you know that bad things happened aboard the Salander 3. You know because you saw them when you went there again. After you and Rachel were born, something happened to your father, and then a lot of bad things happened. Your mother managed to save not only you but your twin sister, Rachel, as well. But your mother died in the process. She was killed by the man who loved her. Insane when he killed her. Sane or close enough when he killed himself. Still a problem, Deckard, even if everything you say is true." Sarah held the photo in one hand and the gun still trained on him in the other. "There was only one child taken off the Salander 3 when it returned to Earth, and that was me." "That's right." He returned her level gaze straight into Sarah's eyes. "Your sister was left on board the Salander 3, in the sleep transport chamber that was part of the ship's equipment." When Marley had told him, he'd had a vision of the infant, a small, helpless thing inside the glass-lidded coffin. Another of the suspended animation devices, like the one his own Rachel had slept and died in. "That was where your mother hid her to save her from your father. You were still in your mother's arms when your father killed her. Then the ship's autonomic circuits took care of you on the voyage back to Earth. And all the while your twin sister, Rachel, slept on inside the transport chamber. Slept and didn't age, even after the Salander 3 had returned home and you were taken from it. You're right. Only one child was taken from the ship. Your twin sister, Rachel, was either overlooked where she was sleeping inside the transport chamber. The Tyrell Corporation employees who went aboard might not have searched very thoroughly, given the things they found when they went in, or she might have been deliberately left there. Either on Eldon Tyrell's orders or someone else's, I don't know. That part's still a mystery, just like it's a mystery as to who took your sister, Rachel, out of the transport chamber 10 years ago and left her there for the Salander 3's autonomic circuits to rear. That might have been done on your uncle's orders as well. Deckard could hear a grating edge in his own voice. He'd already started to let some of his, shall we say, personal obsessions take over his thinking. That's what led him to have another Rachel created, a replicant based on you. An invisible knife carved away another section of Deckard's heart as he found himself speaking so coldly of the origins of the woman with whom he'd fallen in love. Maybe Eldon Tyrell was too impatient to wait for the real Rachel, the child still inside the Salander 3, to grow up, so he found another way to get what he wanted. Don't be too hard on him. Sarah looked at the photo again. I hated him, and I wasn't sorry to hear that he was dead. But I've got a right to feel that way. You don't. My uncle was just another poor bastard who loved something too much. He must have loved Ruth a great deal. Her voice went softer. But he couldn't have her, because she loved his brother, Anson, my father, and she went off with him, far, far away. Sarah slowly shook her head. And that's what made him do the things he did, with me and with Rachel, the replicant he created, because he loved her. He loved Ruth. Pygmalion. One word was all that Deckard spoke. What do you mean? There were still things that she needed to know, and that he had to tell her. An old story, said Deckard, about someone who fell in love with his own creation. Sarah's gaze narrowed above the gun. I don't know what you're talking about. It's simple. With one hand, Deckard brushed rain from the side of his face. When the Salander 3 left Earth, heading out on its mission to the Proxima system, there were no humans aboard it. Ruth and Anson Tyrell, the parents of you and your twin sister Rachel, they weren't humans. They were replicants. A look of panic flitted behind Sarah's widened eyes. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible. Deckard gazed at her sadly, as though regretting the need to speak of these things, especially not when it's part of the Tyrell Corporation's secret history. There's stuff you just don't know about. Eldon Tyrell did have a brother, but that brother died when he was a child. The Anson Tyrell that headed out to the Proxima system aboard the Salander 3 was a replicant, created in the Tyrell Corporation's labs as a special top-secret project. As was the female replicant they named Ruth. Neither one of them knew that they were replicants, like the adult Rachel, when I first met her at the Tyrell Corporation headquarters. They thought they were human. And they went on the Salander 3 still believing that. They were misled about their own nature, what kind of creature they were. So it's no surprise that they didn't know the actual reason for the Salander 3's so-called mission to the Proxima system. Which was? According to you, I mean? He shook his head. It's not just according to me. I didn't figure out all this stuff. I wouldn't have been able to. Somebody told you this? A cold fury narrowed Sarah's gaze. Who? Nobody you can touch. He's dead now. Deckard could still hear the other man's voice inside his head. The secrets that Marley had imparted to him. All the secrets of the world that Sarah Tyrell lived in. The world that she could never escape, no matter how she tried. The secrets that she had never known, that her uncle had never told her, that Eldon Tyrell had done his best to make certain she never found out. Deckard could see Marley leaning across the table in the bar's little booth, looking straight into his eyes and seeing reality there. That all the words Marley spoke, all the connected bits of what had been purged from the Tyrell Corporation archives were true. Eldon Tyrell had tried to murder the past, to make it cease to be. But he failed. The past still existed, the record of it, the history of the Salander 3 expedition. Eldon Tyrell had been able to do whatever he wanted with his corporation's archives, but even he hadn't been able to touch the UN's top-secret databases. The rep simps that Marley had worked for had managed to infiltrate the UN's immigration agency, and they had found the truth, the evidence of that which they had already come to suspect. Marley had told him, and now Deckard spoke the same words to the woman standing in front of him. The Salander 3 was never meant to reach the proc system. He watched Sarah's reaction to what he told her. It didn't need to for Eldon Tyrell to find out what he wanted to know. The things that Marley had told him back in the bar in the Martian immigrant colony. Deckard recited them now, a well-memorized lesson. All that the mission needed to accomplish was to get beyond the reach of the Earth's morphogenetic field. That's what keeps humans and replicants the way they are. On Earth, replicants don't reproduce. They don't have children. They can't. It's physiologically impossible. But what the Salander 3's mission showed was that all that changes out in the stars. There had been indications of this before, but Eldon Tyrell required proof, and he got it. Deckard nodded toward the figure before him. You're the proof that the Salander 3 returned with. You and your twin sister, Rachel. The little girl down below us. The ship came back with the first 2 replicant children. The children born to the replicants that Eldon Tyrell had sent out there. Rain had darkened Sarah's hair, a shining black curve, having come loose from where it had been bound and now trailing alongside her throat. That can't be. The gun in her hand was studded with drops of water, like domed black sequins. You're lying. He pointed to the photograph in her other hand. There's the proof that what I'm saying is true. Her dark eyes flared in anger. This is nothing! Sarah flung the picture away. It landed face down on the wet roof. I don't know where you got that thing, and I don't care. I got it, said Deckard. From your mother. From the replicant Ruth Tyrell. In a way, that is. She had hidden it back aboard the Salander 3, inside one of the first aid kits on the ship. She just had time to do that before she was hunted down and killed by your father. Really? Sarah looked scornful. And why would she want to do that? I don't know. He gazed down at his own rain-wet hands for a moment. Maybe she had found out something. Maybe. She suspected the truth about herself and about her children. There might have been a slip, something in the Salander 3's computers that had been inadvertently left there by Eldon Tyrell. Some little clue about the ship's mission. Deckard shrugged. Or maybe not. Maybe it was just something that Ruth knew inside herself. And she knew she had to leave a message, some kind of proof, so that people would know what had happened. And they did. They found the photograph, then hid it again, even better. It became a little sacred object, a relic, a holy thing. But it wasn't really for them. That wasn't why Ruth hid it there. It was for you. He brought his gaze back to Sarah's eyes. So you would know. Her daughters. The scornful expression had changed to one of desperation. I still don't believe it. That photograph could have been faked. Maybe so. But the things that happened aboard the Salander 3, the things you saw when you went there again, when you saw the past, those things couldn't have been faked. It really happened. That your father killed Ruth. That he would have killed you and your sister, Rachel, as well, if she hadn't managed to protect you. Deckard folded his arms across his chest. There's only one possible explanation for all of that. The replicant named Anson Tyrell wouldn't have gone insane, murderously insane for no reason. But the reason he did had been programmed inside him by Eldon Tyrell as a fail-safe protection in case it turned out that replicants could be made capable of reproducing themselves. He wanted to make sure that that knowledge was suppressed. So he built into Anson's brain a whole destructive sequence, a stepfather syndrome, based on primitive behavior patterns. And it worked. Your father would have killed both you and your sister Rachel if he had been able to get you. As it turned out, it was still enough to destroy both your mother and your father. That was enough. Eldon Tyrell could cover up or get rid of the other evidence about what had happened out there, what it meant. The only thing he didn't do was go ahead and have the 2 children destroyed, the daughters of the replicants he'd sent out on the Salander 3. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something else. But he let you live. Rachel went on sleeping in the transit chamber on board the ship, and you became his niece. Even you believed it. And why shouldn't you have? You thought you were human. You thought you were the original, the template for the replicant Rachel that Eldon Tyrell created later. Deckard tilted his head back, letting the rain strike his eyelids, then looked over at Sarah again. You just didn't know that Rachel, the adult one, was a copy of a copy. A replicant of a replicant. Just because she wasn't a human. That doesn't mean you're one. Sarah's gaze had fastened upon her hand, the one holding the gun, as though she were seeing it for the first time. Who? She spoke flatteringly. Who told you? All this. Does it matter? Whoever it was. Her teeth clenched with anger. They were lying. Sarah. Her name, his voice low, the syllables as kindly said as possible. You know it's true. You might not have known all the details, but the truth. You knew that all along. At least from the time you went back to the Salander 3 and you found her. The little girl, your sister, the first Rachel. She was real and you knew it. You knew you weren't crazy. You knew you weren't suffering from some hallucination. Yet you kept on saying that you were. Saying that she wasn't real. She didn't exist. Even though you knew she did. He drew a deep breath, the damp air filling his lungs. You wouldn't have done that if you hadn't realized what it meant that that child should be there at all. And you knew somehow, you felt it, that she was your sister, that she was the same as you. The words had had an impact on Sarah. She closed her eyes, swaying slightly where she stood, the gun's weight trembling in her hand. After a moment, she nodded slowly. Yes. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible. I knew. You knew, said Deckard, but you did not believe because you didn't want to. She said nothing. There was nothing more for her to say. Now what do you want? He watched, pitying her now. I don't know. Sarah looked at the gun in her hand. I suppose I could just go ahead and kill you. She sounded close to crying, a broken thing. Since you didn't love me. You never did. I never did. I never could. She looked at him, eyes pleading. Is that what I should do? Maybe. Deckard shrugged. He felt tired at the end of his own words. But if you do that, remember. He looked up at the video cameras watching them. That's what they wanted you to do. You're right. Sarah nodded, her gaze focused on some deep interior vista. That's what I've always done. I've never even known what I wanted. She looked up at him. But now I do. He knew what she meant. He knew what would happen next. Are you sure? Sarah nodded. It was always going to come to this. You win, Deckard. No, he shook his head. You do, because now you get what you want. I suppose you're right. Exhaustion sounded in her voice, as though from the long journey it had taken to reach this place. She managed a smile, a fragile turn of her mouth. Could you? She lowered her hand, letting the gun drop to her side. Could you kiss me? The way you kissed her? No words. Deckard took her in his arms, feeling the warmth of her body through his own rain-soaked clothes. She turned her face, eyes closed, up to his. Time stopped. Memory took its place, but even that had to end. She was kind to him. She took care of herself. The gun fell to the rooftop, a black shape surrounded by a thin, rippling mirror, even as the echo of the shot rolled against the studio walls, the night city's false horizon. She fell then, and was still beautiful. He looked down at the crumpled form, something that might have once been human. The blood from her shattered temple flowed and mingled with the pooled rain. Deckard looked up at the cameras. How about that? His furious shout battered the empty lenses. Was that good enough? Did you get what you wanted? As though in answer, the observing spark died inside all the video cameras. The artificial rain had already stopped. Now the lights came up, dispelling the false night. The taping was over. Deckard stood in the center of the building set's roof, a dead woman at his feet, one that had the face of someone he'd loved, now wrapped in the same sleep, the one from which there was no waking, the one he envied. He still had a job to do. He left the gun where it lay, a few inches from Sarah Tyrell's hand, and walked back toward the stairs. The Rachel child had fallen asleep at the table, her head upon the old leather-bound book. Deckard touched her shoulder. She sat up, blinking and frowning. She rubbed her eyes with her knuckles. I'm kind of hungry, she announced. That's all right. Deckard took the child's hand and helped her from the high-backed chair. We're going home. The girl looked up at him as he led her toward the door, past the silent toys. Where's that? I don't know, said Deckard. I guess we'll find out.